We've talked about the structure of state government, the three branches like the parts of a car. But knowing the parts doesn't tell you how the car runs. Functioning is the engine itself, the process. How does a complaint from a citizen turn into a new law? How does a tax dollar you pay at the store turn into a new textbook for your school? That's the how, and it's what we're exploring today. First, what do state governments actually do? They are, at their heart, giant service providers. Think about your day. The public school you go to? That's managed and funded by the state. The road you take to get there? Built and maintained by the state. The driving laws that keep people safe? Written by the state and enforced by state police. While the federal government handles things like the military, your state government handles the things you see and touch every single day. The single most important function of any state government, and the one that causes the most arguments, is the budget. The budget is just a giant, complicated plan for how to spend the state's money for 1 year. You can tell what a state really cares about by looking at its budget. If they spend 50% of their money on education, that's their #1 priority. This whole process is a tug of war. The governor proposes a budget, their wish list, and the legislature approves it after weeks or months of fighting and changing it. But where does all that money come from? It doesn't just appear. The fuel for the government is revenue, which we pay as taxes. The most common is the sales tax. When you buy a $20 video game and the total is $21.20, that extra $1.20 is the sales tax going to the state. Many states also have an income tax, where they take a small percentage of every paycheck you earn. This money is pooled together to pay for all the services, from state troopers to state parks. States don't just use their own money. A huge chunk of their budget comes from the federal government in Washington, D.C. This money is called a grant in aid, and it's usually for big, specific projects that the whole country cares about. The federal government helps pay for the massive interstate highway system, and it gives states money to help pay for health care for low-income citizens, called Medicaid. This federal money almost always comes with a catch. It's money with strings attached. This is called a mandate. The most famous example happened in the 1980s. The federal government wanted all states to have a drinking age of 21. They couldn't force them. So they said, any state that doesn't raise its drinking age to 21 will lose its federal highway funding. Every state quickly changed its law. This is a powerful way the federal government can persuade state governments to function in a certain way. Let's follow the life of a new law. Say a legislator in your district sees a lot of accidents from texting and driving. They introduce a bill to ban it. That bill doesn't go to everyone. First, it goes to a small committee, maybe 10 legislators on the Transportation Committee. If they vote yes, it goes to the floor where all 100 members of the House vote. If they vote yes, it's not a law yet. It has to go to the other house, the Senate, and do the exact same thing all over again. It's a long obstacle course. The most important part of that process is the committee. Committees are the filters of the legislature. They are the workhorses. Thousands of bills are introduced every year, and most of them are bad ideas. The committee's job is to read the bill, debate it, and listen to experts and citizens give testimony. They can change the bill, amend it, or most often, they just vote no or ignore it. When this happens, the bill is dead and the process stops. So how does a legislator in that committee or on the main floor decide to vote yes or no? They're getting pulled in a bunch of directions. First, they listen to their constituents, the people in their home district who elected them. If all their voters hate a bill, they'll probably vote no. But they also hear from lobbyists, who are paid professionals who represent specific groups. A lobbyist for a tech company might argue against the texting while driving ban, while a lobbyist for an insurance company will argue for it. Okay, The miracle happened. The bill passed the House and the Senate. Now it lands on the governor's desk. The governor functions as the final check on the legislature. If the governor likes the bill and thinks it's good for the state, they will sign it, and it becomes a law. But if the governor thinks it's a terrible idea, expensive, or just plain dumb, they can veto it. A veto is a powerful no that rejects the bill and sends it right back to the legislature. But governors have an even cooler power, one the US president doesn't have. It's called the line item veto. Imagine the legislature sends the governor the 500-page state budget. It's full of good things, but on page 480, there's $10 million for a brand new, unnecessary statue. The president would have to veto the entire 500-page budget just to stop the statue. But a governor can take a pen, cross out just that one line, and then sign the rest of the budget into law. It's a surgical strike. Is the governor's veto the end of the story? Not always. The legislature has its own check on the governor. It's called the veto override. If the governor vetoes a bill, the bill goes back to the legislature. If they really believe in it, they can vote again. But this time, they need a supermajority, not just 51%, but usually 2/3 of the members. If they get that massive vote, they override the veto, and the bill becomes a law anyway, without the governor's signature. It's the ultimate legislative trump card. So a law is finally passed. Let's say it's the Clean Rivers Act. The law is just a piece of paper. It doesn't do anything. The executive branch now has to implement it. The governor, as the chief executive, will order the Department of Environmental Protection, a state agency, to carry out the law. This means they will start testing water, find polluters, and write the specific rules on what chemicals are banned. This implementation part is where the law becomes real. These state agencies are the hands of the executive branch. You interact with them all the time. When you go to get your driver's permit, you're not meeting your governor. You're meeting a state employee at the DMV, or Department of Motor Vehicles. That person is implementing the state's driving laws. When your school gets its funding or is told what subjects you need to pass to graduate, that's the Department of Education implementing education laws. Two other key executive members are not the governor. The Attorney General is the state's top lawyer. Think of them as the state's heavy hitter. If a big corporation breaks the law and pollutes the state's air, the Attorney General sues them on behalf of the people. If another state or even the federal government does something that hurts their state, the Attorney General can take them to court. The Secretary of State has one of the most important functions in a democracy. They are the chief referee for elections. This person is in charge of making sure every vote is counted correctly, that all the polling places work, and that the final results are accurate and fair. They are also usually in charge of registering new businesses, so if you want to start your own company, you file the paperwork with the Secretary of State. What about when the governor has to be the boss in a really tough situation? This is the crisis management function. If a massive hurricane floods a coastal city or a wildfire rages out of control, the governor takes charge. They are the commander-in-chief of the state's National Guard. These are citizens who are also part-time soldiers. The governor can call them up to rescue people from rooftops, set up emergency shelters, and maintain order in a disaster. Now for the judicial branch. How do they function? State courts are the workhorses of the American legal system. They handle more than 90% of all cases. If someone is arrested for shoplifting, they go to state court. If two people get in a car accident and sue each other, they go to state court. If a couple files for divorce, that's state court too. They are constantly refereeing disputes and interpreting state laws. The state Supreme Court has one check that's even more powerful. It's called judicial review. Let's say the legislature passes a new law. and the governor signs it. But what if the law is unconstitutional? For example, what if the law said no one is allowed to criticize the governor? The state Supreme Court would step in, review that law, and strike it down, declaring it void because it violates the state constitution's guarantee of free speech. Finally, what's our function in all this? In many states, citizens are the ultimate check. Through the initiative process, citizens can skip the legislature entirely. If you get enough signatures, you can put your own idea for a law on the ballot for everyone to vote on. And with a referendum, you can challenge a law the legislature just passed. Get enough signatures, and you get a chance to veto their law at the ballot box. This is direct democracy, and it's how the people function as the final boss.